What was that life like when you first got into the entrepreneurial world?
Pretty uncertain. It can be very up and down and sideways, especially if you are in a leadership position or even if you're not, if you're working in a startup. It's a lot of uncertainties.
What did you do about the skill sets that you weren't good at?
One of the crucial things in any kind of leadership position is recognition of what you're good at and what you're not. And then also being able to bring in people or attract people that can fulfill those roles.
Ali Rahman, the CEO at Fly, a cross-chain liquidity protocol that lets users swap assets across different blockchains instantly and securely without bridges or wrapped tokens. It aggregates liquidity from multiple sources to offer fast, low slippage trades.
Is there ever a world where you guys go more on the consumer-facing side of things?
I personally believe there's nothing like having direct consumer distribution. My opinion is it's ideal. If you own the direct consumer, you own the distribution, that's ideal. You don't rely on any other third parties.
What is a few pieces of advice you'd give someone that's really going for their first attempt at being a founder or entrepreneur?
Well,
Welcome back to the Lock In or Log Off podcast, where I speak to builders, creators, and investors to understand how they spotted the opportunity and how they navigated their way to success. Today, I'm joined by Ali from Fly. How's it going?
pretty good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I like to start these off a little bit of life before Web3. And I think you've obviously had a pretty good big come up from everything that's happened within your life. And there's an iconic quote that goes, "Everyone is jealous of what you have got, but not how you got it." Would you be able to dive into a little bit of how you have gotten to where you are now?
Sure. I think I've got a bit of an interesting journey. My background in terms of my education is medicine. So I did medicine. I'm a general physician, a doctor, but I'm into tech. I've been since the very beginning. So I'll take you back, roll back the years a bit. I think I was like 14, 15, a rather kind of obsessive personality that likes quirky things. And I was interested at the time in kind of like video editing, augmented reality, and anything I would pick up, I kind of focus heavily on that. And then I had this opportunity to participate in like a startup accelerator. So this is before I knew anything about crypto. This was just like my first experience with entrepreneurship and seeing how interesting or exciting that is. And it turned out quite well. I put myself in an uncomfortable position where I'm pitching in front of like 200 people. It's like a pretty young dude, and I kind of grasped from that I have certain skills, certain things that's something that I should probably work on. And so yeah, so I started off as that. I was deep into research at the time as well, and I got my first few patents on called the title is a bit much. It's like a non-holographic teleportation.
Wow.
It sounds fancy, but it's basically live chroma keying the foreground and the background. But again, something that I was interested in, and it gave me invaluable experience. As it happens, it was actually in Dubai that I participated in this startup accelerator. So that was like my first taste of entrepreneurship. Even though it was mostly like a tech guy, I was more comfortable behind the computer writing code. Um, so that's how things started. I do come from a medical background. By that I mean like everybody around me is a doctor, as a specialist in one thing or the other, and so science was something that I had an affinity for to begin with. And so I had this opportunity between potentially going to Germany to study medicine or going to China. So the German medicine degree is a bit different. It's called like a state exam. And in China, it's more standard, like a Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery. And so it was a wild choice at the time, but I ended up choosing that. And that's probably one of the most defining things I've done that changed my perspective on what different cultures, and that really gave me the start because of how the society is structured, how pro entrepreneurship it is. So I did medicine there, learned a lot, started one of my other pretty successful businesses focused on. So this is like 2015, 2016. And that's when I kind of learned about blockchain. One of my mates introduced it to me. Is like, it's going to change finance. It's going to change governance. I was like, cool. Let's see what it's about. And I instantly grew attached to the ethos and what it could mean, and just kept myself involved as like a P2P borrower, lender, trader, and started actively building in the space. But yeah, that's kind of the journey pre crypto. There's obviously a lot more that I kind of participated in between 2016 and now.
What was you mentioned that going to China was one of the most pivotal parts of it all. What did you learn from that experience? Because I think there is so much there's a lot to learn from when you experience different cultures. And I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've spoken to all have touched multiple cultures, and it's helped them within their kind of entrepreneurial journey. But also too, like the product of your environment. You mentioned China was very pro entrepreneurship, and being surrounded by that and how it impacted you. What were the main learnings you had from that experience?
The first thing is that China was just like an entirely new place, possibly like not very common for people to go for medicine. So it was a big deal. It was new. You don't speak the language at all, and nobody speaks your language or English at all either. So it was pretty new. But what I understood about the culture is something about just hard work. It's not a choice. It's not an option. It's something that people do. It's just ingrained in society as just part of how people live. Plus, being in touch with a lot of my Chinese friends, people from all across the globe, that obviously gave me a lot more exposure to different cultures, and that really just changed my perspective on other people, because I hadn't experienced that intimately before. The thing that struck me, I was obviously doing medicine there, but how open the institutions there were to support young entrepreneurs who might be passionate about a certain thing. And so I'm a naturally passionate person. When I find interest in something, I kind of go all in. And so while I'm doing medicine, I'm also pursuing this thing that I just discovered, which is blockchain technology. And I'm like, what can we do with this? And there's a few nice what I find interesting parallels I can draw about my experience in medicine and in life in general. But what happened in China was that while I'm doing medicine, I'm interested in this technology and trying to set up a business around that. And the environment, the regulations, there was no regulation for a Chinese a student to set up a fully foreign-owned business. You need to have like a partner. So there's no regulations, there's no rules for that. And so we ended up being this example where we got our business license in less than 20 minutes, made the local news, purely because the environment there, the institution, the organizations were more in line. They were more supportive of the idea that there's these young foreign students that are interested in building something more. And we just got our business license in 20 minutes, something that was not allowed for foreign students to hold a business. They changed the law and made a modification for us. Obviously, that's not credit to me. I think that, which is going back to my point about some of my learnings, is that when you are persistent about something, when you're passionate about something, and you are consistently doing that, sometimes, not always, sometimes things kind of align in a way that things work out. That's kind of what happened, and that changed my perspective on just trying something and passionately pursuing it. And more often than not, it doesn't really work out, but sometimes it does. And when it does, it really just changes how you perceive and how you value persistence and constant effort.
Yeah, I think consistency and consistence and like constant effort is key to a lot of people's success. But you mentioned there, like, it doesn't always work out. How do you decide when to stop? Like, has there any been situations where you've been super persistent and it didn't work and you decided to stop? Because obviously the mentality in many ways that people are looking when they start an entrepreneurship is like, it's all or nothing. Like, they just keep going, keep going, keep going. Because like at some point it'll achieve what they believe it can. But how do you judge whether you should continue to go or whether it's something that you should explore other opportunities?
I think for me, it's never been that. When do I stop? It's a good thing for you to ask yourself and consider that maybe this isn't working out, or maybe I should just change the game and do something different. I've had those situations where something you keep on trying and it doesn't work, and the question I ask myself is that what am I doing wrong, and why is this not a good fit? Because it's not a good idea for you to push a wall, because it's just not going to work. So you have to think, what is going wrong and what can I do differently? And so you would call that a pivot.
Yeah.
So you kind of pivot into something that maybe aligns more with environment. I'll give you an example. So in medicine, or epidemiology in particular, which is study of diseases, you've got an epidemiological triad. So it's a combination of three things, where you've got a host, you've got a vector, and then you've got the environment. So you need the vector or the source of the virus, the bacteria, and then you need a host, and then you need the environment. You need all of these three things to align perfectly for a disease to be successful, to make a person sick. That's how you study causation of diseases and how they spread in society or among a group of people. So a success for a disease is a combination of the viral factor, the bacterial factor in itself that it wants to spread, then the host, and then the right environment. And this is success for a disease. And the success for a business or an entrepreneur is, well, you have a good idea, right idea, PMF, product, whatever you want to call that, the right group of people that focus on execution. And the third thing you don't necessarily control all the way, which is the environment, having the right thing in place. And so you have to ask yourself is, what I'm working on, the core principles of my idea, are they valid? Do they still apply to when we started? And if they do I have the right execution? Do I have the right people? Do I have the means to implement or build that I intend to? And number three, is this the right time? Maybe it's too early. Maybe it's too late. Maybe people don't recognize it. And that's where kind of persistence comes in, that you believe in something and you know that it can work out. So you kind of just thug it out and you see if it works, or you try something different to achieve the same outcome. So that's kind of how I see things.
That's a very analytical perspective, but I think it's actually a really interesting perspective. I think it's definitely one that I can take for a lot that I'm doing, and approach it in that way is kind of looking at those three verticals and understanding how they align, and then like working out which area might not be fitting right now, and whether it's something that will never fit, or whether it's, like you say, it's just needs an adjustment or pivot within that world. But you obviously approach, by the sounds of it, business life from a very analytical mind, but also relating a lot to your scientific background. How much do you think your studying science and going down that route has impacted you as an entrepreneur?
Significantly, I think. This may also apply to just how I see. This could apply to any scientific, mathematical, or any kind of field as such, where you kind of boil things down to first principles, and why I have an affinity for medicine, and why I think that's the perfect example to apply to business or any other walk of life, just because of how much variability that exists. So when you think about the human body and you think about, any organism for that matter, there's external stimuli that that results in some physiological response in the body or in the plant body. If it's sun, the plant kind of move towards the sun. There's a lot of chemicals there's a lot of physiological response that comes into play. And so studying pharmacology, studying epidemiology, like all of these things help you draw parallels into a complex system, which is life. It's extremely complex, extremely, it's a game of probabilities. And so I think a lot of how I think about things, how I think about even things about philosophically in relationships, in business, it draws from the things that I've learned and applied and understood in me pursuing medicine. So that's not to say that I'm a good doctor, though. I have a running joke that if you're sick, probably call a real doctor.
Yeah.
If your laptop's not working, I might be the right person for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still keep those kind of fundamental learnings with me and apply them wherever I can.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think there's a lot of tech entrepreneurs that come from that science background, or that curiosity in science, at least to start, and that can be easily transferred into a lot of these tech industries specifically. But before we go further into the crypto side of things, obviously we had a chat before this, and kind of a phrase that stuck with me is, you said, I had to build things not just out of passion, but survival. Can you go a little bit more into what that experience was like, of having one motivation to just a curiosity to build stuff, but also the need for it to be a success?
I think one of the good things for me in general is, like, if I'm passionate about something, it becomes a question of how am I gonna figure this out. So it always, even now, what I do, even though it may not genuinely or like accurately be a question of survival, but that's kind of how important it is. But speaking on my experiences growing up, I think the the necessity or the need for you to do something, plus your desire, is something really important. The need and necessity kind of just is like you're backed up in a corner,
Yeah.
and then you just don't have a choice. There's no excuse. There's no reason. It's just like, this is what it is. These are the cards that I'm dealt, and then you have to push forward. And while in certain points in my life there were no choices, and it was my back against the wall, and then you just don't have a choice. But but I apply that to most of the things that I do now, just even kind of mentally, because that puts you in a position. Because I see a lot of people often talk about how, or people used to tell me that, oh, I work so hard and I work too much, and I've got no life. Which, by the way, is to me, I say that most of my team members have no life, and that's a compliment. That's a
Yeah.
compliment because they're just
They're
they don't
obsessed.
yeah, and they don't feel like they're missing out on anything because they
Yeah.
enjoy what they do. And so for me, the need to do some of these things, or having my back against the wall, it's just something that now has, come naturally. I lost my train of thought.
No, but on that specifically, obviously, like there's the whole thing of being backed up against the wall, but there's also an interesting study of like a lot of people then struggle to get rid of that, feeling of like you have to achieve something to make sure there's food on the table. But obviously, you've gone to that point now in your entrepreneurial career that it's no longer life or death. I know you approach a lot of those things, but have you let go of that at all? Has the motivations changed at all of like how you approach everything in life, or do you think part of that still impacts how you work on a day to day?
A part of that always does, and I feel like that's probably more effective for you, especially as a founder, somebody who's like really driven by some outcome, because then you just don't really feel like you're missing out on anything. It's just that there's this thing that I've got to do. This is what matters to me, and I could go watch this movie, or I could do all of these things, and they sound fun,
Yeah.
but you don't feel like you're missing out because there's this thing that's the center of attention for you. That is your entire complete focus, and you feel good as well. So it's not all, because it seems or sounds gloomy and like, oh, this is all that you do, and then don't go play games. Well, sure. Me and my fellow co-founders, we moved here. Like, we used to just like work, and then we used to just talk shit about whatever anime we were into.
Yeah.
Or we'll just play some Dota. So like, you have those moments, but you don't feel like you're missing out because you enjoy what you do. And I think that the need for doing something because you don't have any options was, at least in my case, was something that was good, because I never felt like, this is why
Yeah.
are things this way. Well,
It was just a
maybe,
supercharge of something you enjoyed already.
yeah, and it's just like, okay, I've got no choice, and I think that works in your favor, because then you just don't have a choice,
Yeah.
and you learn to enjoy what you do.
And going into the entrepreneurial side of things, obviously, I think that mentality helps a lot when starting businesses as such. But what was that life like when you first got into the entrepreneurial world? Because I think obviously being an entrepreneur is very glamorized across social media these days, but can be a very unique world, especially in the new tech industry. It's very volatile in many ways. What was your experience like when first getting into that world?
Pretty uncertain. Like, even from time to time, I think about, because it can be very up and down and sideways, especially if you are in a leadership position, or even if you're not, if you're working in a startup. It's a lot of uncertainties, and I look at my friends who went through the proper path of graduating and then doing masters and then doing their jobs, and that's stable, that's consistent. And while it can be rewarding to be part of this world, but it can also be pretty taxing and pretty uncertain. So, especially when I started off, it was more like experimentation for me to see what I'm good at. Like, even though I enjoy coding, is that really my niche? Or do I have a niche somewhere else? So I could do coding like an average person, and I could do it well. But what if I've got other skill sets that I could apply in different positions? So for me, it was more experimentation to see what I'm good at. Am I good at forming a team? Am I good at motivating them? Am I good at conflict resolution? And what I discovered for myself was problem solving. That's something that I enjoy doing. It's something that I derive pleasure from, and it's something that I, dare I say, okay, like, good with.
Obviously, being a founder comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of skill sets needed. As you mentioned, you kind of wanted to experiment to work out what skill sets you were good at as such. What did you do about the skill sets that you weren't good at? Was that a thing that you decided to learn yourself? Was that a thing that you decided to find people to help you fill in? Like, how did you manage those situations?
One of the key things I think I'm proud of is the kind of team I've not I can't take credit for how they've assembled around me. It's also a function of the effort that I put into the space, and then we're just like serendipity. Like there's people that a lot of the team members that we have now in the team were community members. They're like contributing positively to some idea that we have, and then them turning into this like 10-year relationship with me and they're the creative director. So one of the crucial things in any kind of leadership position um, is recognition of what you're good at and what you're not, and then also being able to bring in people or attract people that can fulfill those roles. And so I just have a very small. I often say that my job in the company is just like a glorified cheerleader. I'm just like cheering people on. I'm not really coding stuff. I'm just
Yeah.
supposed to make some key decisions, and that's about it. But the real work is being done by. And so I've got these people around me that are extremely qualified, the experts in their own fields, and I'm a bit of jack of all trades. I can be good at that, and you're good at that. But yeah, so like I think the key thing is that recognizing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then finding the right people to fill those roles. And I'm lucky enough that over the years I've been able to meet so many people and work with them, and really have people around me that have the same values, have the same interests, have the same passions, to fulfill these roles in a way that helps us function as a complete organism. Everybody has a role, and they kind of fulfill that.
I think it's beautiful to see that you have found that. I think it's a struggle for a lot of people in this space, is finding good talent to make the startups. And a lot of the great founders I do speak to, it is all about the team that they manage to assemble around the idea that depends on the possibility of execution. What was the commonality that you found with the great people that you've been able to form your team with? Like, is there a certain kind of character or person that you look for?
Yeah, so I've got two. I can speak of my two co-founders in particular. So one of them I met in China, where we were involved in this first kind of this business I talked about that we set up in like 20 minutes, and we kind of changed the game and everything. The thing that we shared in common was our interests, and at the time I was introduced to blockchain and crypto, and we shared the passion for that. Like, this is really cool tech, and like this has such massive implications, and that passion and that interest, and then this person was in an engineering background, so has a certain skill set that I don't. And so the level of interest in a certain thing, and having a different skill set, and kind of combining without really asking that you do this and I do this, just kind of jamming together on something was the way. Because I was not really looking for team members. And taking another example of my co-founder and CTO is that one of these things that I was working on, it's like on-chain market making and AI infrastructure. And so he just randomly, he was a community member. He was somebody that was aware of what we're doing. It's like, reached out. I can do this better than whatever you guys have going on. Like, I can do this 10 times better. I'm an expert at this. It's like, okay, let's see what that's like.
Yeah.
At that time, it was a pseudo anonymous. I don't even know who he is. I just know his alias. And so we go back and forth, and I see that he has that same level of interest, and derives the same kind of pleasure from, solving something and building something that can be utilized or leveraged. And that really helped me bring at least the core. Well, I wasn't really looking to assemble these guys, but we kind of locked up on fulfilling these different distinct roles that we needed. Same thing applies to my kind of creative director, who again was just like a community member who's drawing up some designs and he's publishing them. But then I get to know him, and he ends up he's my person. He's my favorite designer in the world. Like, he's the one who does the best stuff, and I'll fight somebody who disagrees.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's crazy that it just shows how much opportunity can come from just being a community member. I think a lot of people end up finding a lot of amazing talent from those passionate about, just those passionate within their community. Obviously, you're now further down your entrepreneurial world, and a lot of the advice coming from your position right now will be someone who's, like 3 businesses in as such. For those that are starting their first business though, like the 0 to 1, what is a few pieces of advice you'd give someone that's really going for their first attempt at being a founder or entrepreneur?
Well, do something that you enjoy when it doesn't feel like work. And I mean that. I mean, it's probably oversaid that do something that you love and then that it doesn't feel like work. But I literally, very literally, that if you're doing something that you enjoy doing, if it is your passion for video editing and you're doing it and you're having fun, then find the right people that can do other things that you possibly, maybe you don't enjoy. Like for me, I could talk for hours. I enjoy it. And I can't say the same thing for my CTO. He can stay behind his computer and he can write code all day and he enjoys that. So make sure you enjoy what you're doing, and then the things that you don't. And if you've got an idea, you get the right people, because a business or a project can live or die by the people that you surround with or don't surround yourself with. So that's really the key thing, that you can be a lone ranger and you can pull that off for sure. But the key thing is, at some point you're gonna have to find, if you don't have the resources, you're gonna want to find the people that see that vision, see that idea, and bring certain skill sets that perhaps you don't have, and share a similar passion as you, because it all starts in like an apartment or in a garage. And again, cliched, but it's true. That's how things went down for us, and I think that's mostly true, because you're not really spending money off the bat. You kind of want to validate what you're doing, and maybe you have wrong assumptions, and you fix that and you improve that, you move forward.
Interesting point you mentioned there is like obviously at some point you'll expand the team and everything like that. So you have to work out who you want to work with. I've been speaking to a few founders this week around just AI in general, vibe coding, the possibility for one man teams for unicorn businesses. You obviously come from a bit of a background within AI as well. How do you view, just the world of AI within Web3, but also from like a startup perspective? Like we're obviously seeing the capability of making unicorn businesses from 2 to 3 people instead of 30, 40. Yeah. What's your perspective on it all?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would love to be involved in a business that just requires 2 or 3 people. I think it takes something ingenious to do that. It's something that you can creatively build, and it's entirely possible for people to do that. And I think that's more possible now than it was before. Of course, it was still possible before as well, but I think that it's worthwhile to explore AI in itself. The time that I spent a few years working on it, did a lot of research on, largely focused on prediction, market making, sentiment analysis, and things as such. But it's a it's a tough industry. It's a resource intensive industry, especially if you're building AI.
Yep.
But if you've got the tools at your disposal, which we do have with the chat GPTs and other infrastructure and tools, there's so much you can do. Like how quickly ChatGPT has integrated itself within our day to day is even for me with like preparing things, and so it does solve a lot of or solve for a lot of things that you otherwise could have leveraged a person.
Yeah.
And so that's certainly useful, and I do think there's more opportunity now. I feel like there's nothing better than a very low cost small team. uh, those kind of businesses are really exciting. And so if that's what you are inclined towards, if that's the passion that you have, that you see an opportunity, because building products is all about, you see something that others don't.
Yeah.
So I can't possibly advise someone on something that I don't see, because if I did, then I would do it. But yeah, if you see it, go for it, because there is ample opportunity and there's ample resources for people to do that. So there's nothing like it.
Yeah, and there's an interesting opportunity now where like the gap between idea and MVP is so small. Like being able to vibe code. I know a bunch of friends and that have just gone like, oh, like that would be a cool product. And like obviously not all of them are going to become businesses, but like you can get it to an MVP stage where you can test out and see how accurate your idea is and test for PMF a lot quicker than it ever could be. Because I think the biggest barrier for ideas to MVP has always been like devability. But obviously with like Lovable and you use the likes of ChatGPT, it unlocks an interesting dynamic for new entrepreneurs and smaller teams from a resource perspective. But as you mentioned there, it's like the way to start a business is very much to spot the opportunity that you haven't seen. And I saw an interesting quote from Naval Ravikant that was, the best founders start companies not because they want to make money, but because they can't not solve the problem. I know from Fly, when you started Magpie or Fly, it was a similar story from my understanding. Are you able to go a little bit into how it all started?
Yeah. So my fellow founders, we were involved in this AI space for a while. We ended up licensing the tech that we built, and then we just moved out here to Dubai, and we're like, we'll see what we want to do. Maybe we do nothing for a while, and that's really what we did. And one of these days, in some conversation, we're like, we've got all of these assets on multiple chains, and there's no simplistic or easy way for us to manage them. So this is, I think, 2021 when Layer Zero wasn't out. For context, Wormhole was functional on production for cross-chain messaging. So we just try to build something for ourselves to manage our assets across multiple chains. There's a few different bridges. What do I use to move those assets into different chains? Sometimes it would be like Christmas, and you discover that there's this wallet in this MetaMask account that has some of this capital, and that exists on Polygon as well.
Best feeling.
It used to be. And so we were like, it's hard. We need something that we can track our balances, and then we can also move them in a simpler way from one chain to the other. So we just started building something for ourselves to solve for that. We reached out to Wormhole again because they were the only project at the time that were functional with cross-chain messaging. We're like, we want to build this. We just drew an architecture out. We're like, we want to build this. And what do you think? So they're like, this is a really good idea. This architecture of using cross-chain messaging for cross-chain swaps and settlement. And we'd love for you to build that and work with us. And so that's kind of how it began. We didn't necessarily think about the prod as it wasn't really it was a project, but it was more for internal use, for solving a problem that existed, but there were no solutions at the time that were functional live for us to leverage. And then when we spoke to some of these partners and potential technology that we wanted to leverage to implement the solution, we realized that there is opportunity. And so being the kind of people that we are, like, how long are we going to just chill? Right? So might as well. This is a problem that we see that we want to solve for ourselves. Might as well do it at a scale that matters. And that's what we did. That's a bit of the kind of like an origin story of how Magpie came to be.
And for those that aren't aware, what exactly is Magpie or Fly now?
So Magpie is a cross-chain liquidity aggregator. We aggregate dexes, we aggregate bridges. Functionally, we allow you to execute any asset to any asset swaps across all of the chains that we support. We ensure that you get the best pricing, provably so. It's not just take my word for it, but you can actually try it out. So we aggregate dexes, bridges. We leverage cross-chain messaging protocols to ensure that if you move any asset from one chain to the other, that's actually being executed and then accessible to smart contracts on the other chain. So that's really what Magpie, or now Fly.trade, is all about, is allowing you to move from one asset to the other, from one chain to the other, or within the same chain.
How does DeFi XAI, like DeFi, I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't think anyone does
Danny
specifically.
says DeFi. Danny says DeFi.
Yeah,
That's how I say it's DeFi.
DeFi, let's go for that. How does that compare to what you guys are building? Because obviously that facilitates users to very simply engage with AI, to interact with multiple chains and move liquidity across
It's amazing. I think it's all about, like, it kind of boils down to abstraction. So yeah, abstracting away the complexity from the users. That's really what we're intended to do. That there's 15 different bridges or 10 different bridges, and there's 100 dexes, and there's at the time like 12 chains. Now there's hundreds of chains.
So many chains.
There's so many more bridges. And so how and why should a user choose and pick from them? Either it's based on price, it's based on security. So abstracting that complexity for builders as well, for like dApp builders, developers, or for end consumers, that's valuable. That's important. We've seen aggregation successful in the more Web2 examples of like a Skyscanner or a Google or like a Uber or whatever, because they're kind of aggregating everything and giving you the simplest and the easiest information that you could need to execute whatever you want. Speaking of DeFi or DeFi,
yeah, it's so hard to differentiate it.
Because to say DeFi, I think what it intends to achieve is exactly the same thing: abstracting the complexity away from the users, leveraging AI. Be it, we've seen a lot of like prompt-based protocols that facilitate that. Hey Anon does that to a certain extent as well. That's been the focus, but it's more than that. And I'm excited about a lot of these protocols. These inherently give you an interface to allow to execute a bunch of different things. It could be an automated strategy. It could be accessing different chains. It could be any of these things. But at the end of the day, they do need execution. They are sort of like the front end level abstraction.
Layer.
Yeah. And they can do it better than an aggregator can, potentially, especially the way that AI is kind of evolving. But these still need high quality, consistent execution layers. And that's what an aggregator, especially like ours, is able to facilitate. So here and on as an example, we're integrated into that. And so you could use obviously other aggregators as well, or you could use us as part of that, or you kind of be auto routed to whichever is the best priced. So yeah, I think quite highly about automated strategies and general AI level abstraction for users. It's the whole idea is improve UX. We've talked about interoperability for a while, but we haven't improved, and we're seeing that now. I'm glad that we're seeing this more now than we have had in the past. That we're improving overall user experience for people, so we can finally onboard the next billion users.
One day we will get there. I'm sure as more and more consumer apps come to market, that one day that world will come to reality. But is there ever a world where you guys go more on the consumer facing side of things? Obviously, you guys are executing a lot of it on the back end tech. Is there ever a world where you guys want to have the consumer side of things as well, or is it more within of like dominates the back end tech and dominate that market share specifically?
Honestly, I personally believe there's nothing like having direct consumer distribution. If you can, or we're building in a very competitive space. There's a lot of different aggregators. There's the likes of the OG blue chip DeFi protocols like 1inch that pioneered aggregation. And so it's always like a bias as well that it's 1inch, like it's something that you trust as brand value there. So it's a very competitive space. The way that we shine is obviously the pricing. More often than not, we'll give you the better pricing, but that in and of itself is not enough to attract the end retail consumer. So my opinion is it's ideal if you own the direct consumer, the retail
Own the
audience.
distribution.
Yeah, you own the distribution. That's ideal. You don't rely on any other third parties. However, to do that is difficult. For us, we've done both. We're focused on the B2B side. We've focused on having this back end tech that gives you that optimal pricing. And then now we win order flow through the integrations that we currently have. We've got over 30 integrations, wallet providers, other decentralized apps, and we'll continue to push along in that direction. And then the other side is consumer centric side. And that's where a part of our token comes in that we want the consumers to use us because we are already I would say the best priced aggregator in this space, or more often than not, because aggregation is again competitive. So like it's always about percentages. So more often than not, we'll give you a better price on your favorite EVM chain and pretty soon on your favorite non-EVM chain as well. And so yeah, so that's what we would like, and we will definitely venture into that chain abstraction, or we call it like, or my co-founder calls it universal aggregation, where you're going to be able to do wild things between chains. So that's something that we have in the pipeline over the course of this year.
Fascinating. You mentioned obviously aggregation's a competitive world, and that you guys tend to always win on the price side of things. How is that possible? How do you win? What is your moat and edge?
So aggregation, I believe like there's an art of aggregation. Aggregation in itself is a black box. So 1inch and other aggregators in the space have a specific discovery algorithm where they decide that a user wants to swap 1 ETH into, or 100 ETH into USDC. Now there's 50 different dexes of different kinds. There's a UniV2 pool, there's a UniV3 pool, there's Balancer V3, there are hooks, there's a lot of different liquidity sources. An aggregator decides, where does this 100 ETH order, how do you distribute that to give you the best output? And each aggregator does this differently because their infrastructure, their structure is different. Some are storing liquidity pool information off chain, running different discovery routes to ultimately give you the best amount out. And so this is what 1inch or other, Kyber or whoever, they do it differently. So it's a black box, the aggregation itself. Why I know that we're better is, well, we've kind of tested it. We've run simulations to see how often we're better and how often we're not compared to different competition across different chains. It's a function of how many liquidity sources we support. But as to why that is the case, the credit goes to the fact that, and something that I haven't mentioned so far, is my CTO's obsession with aggregation. Like from day one, he's been obsessed. And even now, I would rather have him work on this thing. Maybe we should work on this, but he's still going to refine that aggregation algorithm. And that gives us the edge because he is passionate about ensuring that we have the most efficient algorithm in the space, and it's been structured and designed in a way that it can scale from EVMs that we currently support over 19 even to non-EVMs. There's no other aggregator that is as competitive as we are that can support an EVM and that can support Solana as well, and then eventually support Sui as well. So yeah, that's really the key. It's the discovery algorithm that makes a difference between how efficient you can be. And it's always one thing to know. It's always a race to zero. There's only this. There's a level to efficiency that you can get.
Yeah.
At some point, it's just even now it's like minor differences that you have, especially over smaller order sizes. But with bigger order sizes, we're always winning.
Interesting. I think that's it's fascinating to know that it comes from a place of obsession that gives you that edge, and I think it's very fascinating. Obviously, you guys obviously recently announced the tokenomics. You also launched your token, and you've gone for a very different approach in how you've structured that token, and it's in particular the incentive model around it. Can you go a little bit into why you decided to go down the route of incentivizing traders as well as liquidity pool providers?
Yeah, so I've been a fan of like VE33 models, or let's take it back to the Curves model, who pioneered VE curve, so locked curve or vote escrowed curve as it's called, where you've got a native token and then you can lock those tokens up for a while, or in case of curve for 4 years, and that gives you a certain governance rights to vote for emissions on different liquidity pools. Curve is a perfect example because it's a massive blue chip OG protocol that generates a lot of fees because it's extremely efficient as a DEX. And so the voters are able to vote for emissions on different pools, and they get a piece of the revenue that is generated from the protocol. That's the core idea of a vote escrowed or a VE model. I don't want to do injustice to Curve's model, but that's a very rudimentary way to describe it. Then comes VE33 that Andre came up with, which was a cross between Curve's model and Olympus DAO. I was spacing out. Olympus DAO, which had like which kind of had the mimetic value of 3-3, which is game theory. And so like if everybody is staking the token and nobody's selling, we're all winning.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense.
Amazing world.
So VE33 is what Andre pioneered with, I think, solidly. And now within the Sonic ecosystem, which we call our home, and proudly so, we've got X33. So everybody's iterating on the initial curve model, adding additional things on top of that. But these models have worked historically for DEXs, more so for some and not so much for others, because there's a lot of other factors that are at play as well. We decided to take that same model because it has cracked one thing, which is incentives. You align incentives with the right players, which in case of a DEX is you give incentives to a liquidity provider. That brings liquidity. If your pricing algorithm is good and you're integrated into aggregators or people are coming to your interface, then those LPs make fees. In a VE33 model, you as a voter would vote for emissions and you'd get a piece of the revenue. So you would vote for emissions on pools that generate more fees, so you can make more fees. So that's the core idea of VE33, that people would make informed decisions or smart decisions in order to maximize the revenue that they can make. And that's exactly what we've modeled our system around. There's different aggregation token economics, and for the most part, they're governance tokens with a loyalty program. Yeah. There hasn't been too much risk. There hasn't been too much innovation in that direction yet. And that's what we were excited to experiment with. And fortunately for us, the ecosystem that we're building on, which is Sonic, we had the support of Andre, who's just helpful to founders in general, giving advice or giving input on this could be good, this could be not good. And there's other founders in the space as well that kind of give you insight into how this could work, if this is a good idea or no. And that's why we went with what we did. So to kind of distill it down, we're an aggregator, we don't have liquidity pools, and we're incentivizing traders. Already, we provide the better pricing in the space more often than not compared to your other choice of aggregator. But on top of that, if you're using our platform, you also stand to gain a certain portion of the emissions. And so you make, not only do you get better pricing, but you get on an additional token on top of that. So eventually the kind of tapers down to equilibrium where you can potentially have no cost trading to low cost trading.
Interesting.
In the initial days, it's like you could probably get more uh, get more dollars in rather than the fees that you're paying, because that's how the VE33 models typically work. The early adopters tend to get more of the dollar value, then eventually it finds equilibrium at a place where it serves as a rebate. So that's the core idea. We want to incentivize trading. We want people to come trade with us. Yeah.
Interesting. That is that's fascinating. That's given me definitely a better insight into in terms of how you guys have structured it, but also a very fascinating way to structure it to basically nil out the fees as such. Definitely makes it better for the user experience and a competitive advantage. But what are the potential risks with the model that you guys went with? Is there any potential risks for how it can play out?
For sure. It's not easy to model this out because you run the risk of over emitting. Like you can give out a lot of these tokens and people will come farm it and then they'll be gone.
Yeah.
And there's always that concern that you have. And so fortunately for us, I think we've covered all of our bases. We've worked with some of the best guys for token model that worked on the Shadows token model that has, for the most part, been pretty successful. Has done well. Uh, it 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 works the way that it was intended to. So in our case, as well, we've accounted for the fact that there are people who are going to come and try to farm the token, and we don't mind that. As long as you incentivize tokens in the appropriate way, um, you can get the job done, which in our case is to ensure that incentives go to the people that builds loyalty. We want people to come use Fly Trade consistently, even if they're using Rabby, for instance, which we're integrated into, or they're using Euler, and so they're using us. And so there's some incentive for you as well. But as long as you're coming back to us and you're being part of that ecosystem where you are an ex-Fly holder, you can participate in governance, you can vote for emissions. We want you to move over to us and you will be incentivized to do so. However, these incentives, you always run the risk of over incentivizing people to the point where you just you over incentivize and then you lose that value for the token in itself. And we've accounted for that. We've been extremely cognizant of how that works, and which is why it's like one of the first aggregation token models that involve E33. And so we're pretty conscious of and careful of how we move with this approach, ensuring that we can have something that's sustainable, because that's really the end goal for us.
Yeah, I think sounds like you guys have had a very logical approach to it all. I think obviously token launches and tokens in themselves have been a fascinating world within Web3, as we haven't seen too many be able to find product market fit in terms of actually having a good enough flywheel to drive value back to the token in itself. How do you see that specifically in terms of obviously the tokenomics to drive value to the users and to give you better attention and like basically better user acquisition to use you instead of others? Sounds amazing. But then how does the flywheel go back to the token itself?
A proper flywheel is essential. I think even though we've seen a lot of speculative value for tokens, and a lot of tokens are inherently speculative, but they're coming from a more traditional perspective, like a business, if it is a business, should have some fundamental value that flows back to its stakeholders. And so that's something that we have for ourselves as well. So the flywheel, the way that it works is that incentives drive volume, volume drives fees, and fees goes back to stakers. That's the simplest explanation that I can offer, is that a staker of the token that holds XFly can vote for emissions. You vote for emissions on assets that generate volume. These assets then generate fees, or volume generates fees. The more fees you earn, the more revenue you share. So it's a circular economy that drives value back ultimately to the token staker. And yeah, that drives the fundamental value. We are revenue generating as an aggregator. Aggregation, and the reason why we chose to be a true aggregator instead of a meta aggregator is that we can capture value at the lowest level possible. And so the more we innovate on top of that, when we have MEV execution, when we have the pro trading terminal where you have got charts and you've got more exotic order types, and so that gives us the opportunity to capture more value for the service that we offer for the users, and then that value can be driven back to the token stakers. So that circular economy, that flywheel, is something that's crucial to us, because our value can be speculated to be pretty high, pretty low, but there is a fundamental value that you can always ascribe to the project, and I think that's essential for any successful token project to have, because you can anchor yourself to that value.
No matter what, it'll always be able to anchor to that. I like that a lot in compared to a lot of what we see in the world of crypto right now with tokens specifically. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out. But as we're coming towards the end of the episode, what is there for people to look forward to over the next 6 months to a year? I know you recently dropped your roadmap going forward. Are you able to give a little bit of insights of what it looks like for you guys?
Sure, yeah. One of the things that I'm excited about, something we've been working on for a while, is adding support for non-EVMs. So Solana in particular is something that we've been working on for a long time. So SVM, so you can expect us to be live on Solana, going head to head with the giants like Jupiter. So that's always an exciting thing to
Very
do,
exciting.
where well we still have better pricing. So that's something we're excited about. That SVMs, Eclipse as an ecosystem that I'm interested in. On the EVM side, it's easy for us to churn out more EVMs. We'll be live in Abstract probably next week, Unichain, and then you can expect Mega ETH and MOAT as soon as they go live as well. So yeah, on the product side, there's a lot to look forward to. On the token side as well, there's revenue share that's gonna kick. We're gonna kick that off pretty soon as well. Emissions will begin. So yeah, all in all, there's a stacked roadmap. There's a lot of stuff that we're excited about. There's yeah, I could go on. There's chain abstraction. There's universal aggregation. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. I would urge people to kind of look at the roadmap that we have, and then just kind of follow us and see where we go.
For you personally, what are you most excited for?
I think Solana is something that I'm really excited about. Probably a bias because it's something that we've been working on for a while. So I mean, when I myself tested on our staging environment, a swap on Solana, and I'm comparing that with Jupiter, I'm like, this is sick. This is
Yeah.
sick because there's no other aggregator that's so competitive on EVMs that also works on an SVM. That's something that was exciting for me. But that's again a function of the effort that we put into that. I think from a user perspective, there's so much more to look forward to in terms of like automated strategies, like DCA strategies that you can do. I think emissions would be a big thing for users. So like if you are a Berachain user or you are an Ink user, we're coming up with the token too soon, or if you are an Optimism user, like we're gonna have incentives for people to trade your favorite asset or Avalanche, whatever. We'll have stuff for you, and I'm excited to see how people react to that because hands down, we're going to be the best place for people to trade, either directly or indirectly. So you'll be using us one way or the other.
Very exciting. I have to ask, how do you plan to go against the likes of Jupiter? Because there's obviously Solana do have a very strong community feel for it, and Jupiter definitely sit at the heart of a lot of that. How do you go into that market with that in consideration?
Well, it's tough. It's tough because Jupyter is something that I've used myself as well, and I'm a fan of the things that they've built out, and we're in some ways playing catch up to the things that they already deliver. It's just like it's 1 inch, right? Like so, 1 inch. I don't. What we're competition. I don't necessarily see them as that. I've used 1 inch, and I've been a fan of the token, of the projects, and everything. But it's simple. We have a better product. Like, I can be as humble as I can, but the fact is that we can beat all of these protocols and pricing. That in itself is not enough. This better pricing is not really what wins you the consumer side of integrations. But yeah, we've got some tricks up our sleeve with integrations that are already in the works. So we don't necessarily have to compete for Jupiter's business. Like we could be a blip on their radar that does not make much of a difference, but all we need is a fraction of their market share, and that works wonders for us. So we start with that, and then
See where it goes.
see where it goes. Yeah.
Amazing, man. Super exciting times ahead for you. And I'm personally, yeah, very excited to see how you navigate that world. I think something that's fascinating within Web3 in particular is like communities that are built and disrupting those in some ways or bringing innovation to those communities and seeing how everything adapts. So very excited to see how it all plays out for you. I appreciate you coming on the show and looking forward to see what you build.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Amazing. Thank you, man.